Hi guys, I'm Erica.
And I'm Caroline.
And we're here today on the Pithy Chronicle with two really exciting guests.
We are doing a fun collaborative crossover.
Today we have Jack and Amy and their podcast, Booktalk for Booktok. Jack is currently working on her long-awaited screenplay called The Hungry Heart.
We are available for the soundtrack.
Absolutely. And let's introduce Amy. She's currently working on her highly anticipated book, Light of the Forebears, a Wandering Heirs book.
Mm-hmm.
We are so excited to start this discussion.
So sit back, relax, grab a drink of blood, and let's talk vampires. You're listening to the Pithy Chronicle. History with a bite. I'm Caroline.
And I'm Erica. And we bring you history's dirtiest deeds, dripping with sarcasm.
Are you hungry yet? Let's do this. I'm super excited to hear what you guys have brought to the table. We are enjoying our spooktacular event for the entire month of October and focusing on the grim, the gore, the wicked, the wild, and the vampire. So we'd really like to get a very different perspective on a topic that we have been deep diving into.
Thank you for having us on. In case no one knows whose voice is who, I'm Jack.
Hi, Jack.
And I'm Amy.
Just in case any of your listeners are like, who are these two crazies that are... No, I'm trying to not say crazy as much. Who are these two bitches?
Fabulous bitches.
Perfect.
Thank you for having us on.
Thank you so much.
We are so happy.
So it's crazy... Sorry, I'm trying so hard. It's amazing how much you start realizing you say crazy when you start trying to cut out crazy. So,
Yeah.
I've been trying to stop saying crazy because it's always inherently feminine and female and it just has historically derogatory association with women.
Mine was bossy.
Yeah.
I grew up being told I was bossy.
Yeah.
And now it's become this word that you do not use anymore because it is just women who have leadership and you're bossy.
Yeah. So if you hear me struggle with that,
that's okay.
That is such a great segue to our topic.
It is.
It's so funny. Amy is absolutely 100% right because it does have that history of women being portrayed in a certain way, just like what we're about to talk about, vampires and the gender politics behind vampires. It's women who are the crazy ones here.
Right.
Listen, I love a good spooky show. Give me a Twilight or a Vampire Diaries or a Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I will sit there and watch it. But I never really thought about
the subliminal messaging behind it all.
Yeah.
It's so interesting that even in vampirism, in our culture, we associate inherent traits with male vampires versus female vampires. And although vampires are one thing, they're not. There's still this dichotomy when you compare the sexes.
And there's a whole history behind that, and we'll get into that history in a moment, but you see how it started and how little has changed. Even though the vampire itself has changed. But for the sake of this conversation, there's so much vampire lore, tons of media surrounding vampires that for this, Amy and I are going to stick to our two favorites, Twilight and Buffy.
The classics.
For us millennials, the classic.
Legitimately, for our generation, my generation, those are the classics. They're what we grew up with.
Oh, yeah.
I was a Twihard. I remember reading Stephanie Meyer's live
Oh,
my.
What?
Live journal.
Wow.
Oh yeah, and there was a Twilight lexicon that I was a member of, and I remember her playlists for the reading.
Oh, yeah.
I would make the playlist on Napster and listen.
Wow, that's a
LimeWire.
window into Erica right there.
I know. Well, if any of our listeners made it over here, then here's a little fun fact. I wrote a Twilight fan fiction back in the day.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, you did.
And it was AU. That stands for another universe, but it's
Alternate
universe. Wow, I don't even know what I stand for.
Do you even read fan fiction? Like, who are you?
Thank goodness Amy's here to call
You know
it.
what? All my fan fiction now stands within the one universe. But it was fun writing that in my bachelor's degree and then going into my master's. I did this dissertation talking about the gender politics of vampirism. And going back and reading it now was a lot of fun because I haven't read it in a decade almost.
Clearly
Yeah.
paid off. Worth it.
Yeah.
You're doing something
Using your
right.
dissertation for good
For the sake
and
of
evil.
talking about the gender politics and talking about Buffy and Twilight, we're going to put a little bit of parameters around this. We're going to be talking about Edward and Victoria from Twilight, and Amy's going to be talking a whole lot of
Angel and Drusilla, and a little bit of Darla from Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So a
ready.
little bit more history of the vampire. We have the original folklore, and vampires were not sexy. They were not sparkly. They were considered darker in color and really bloated because of how much blood they drank, which I can relate because of wine.
A night after wine, your teeth are kind of red and burst capillaries.
I was thinking like human-sized mosquito.
Oh.
You know how they swell up.
Okay, yeah.
Also creepy.
But a really good
Very
comparison.
squishy. Just like a tick that's been like sucking on you forever.
Pop.
That's not how they were. Please don't imagine that as
Or
the
do.
vampire. That's or do.
Too late.
It was definitely a different idea when it goes into the folklore. And it always came down to the fact that they drank blood and they had blood coming out of their nose and mouths and everything. And at that point, they weren't undead, but rather they were just devils and evil spirits. But
Okay.
So were they possessed by an evil spirit, or they had been turned into an evil
I believe
spirit?
on the folklore, they were the evil spirit. Yeah.
Got
like
it.
they were just
Okay.
here on a little trip, having fun, doing what evil spirits do.
Causing chaos, drinking blood, mosquitoing.
Random Tuesday.
Right.
I'm really relating
Right.
to this part. I ate a lot of Panda Express tonight, so I'm feeling bloated as well.
Oh,
That sounds amazing.
Great joy and great regret. It isn't until 1819 that a novella comes out called Vampire, and that's spelled Vampyre. I just thought that was important because like they threw in a Y in there.
Vampire.
Oh.
Thank you. Vampire.
I don't know.
And yeah, no.
But you said it with conviction, and that's all that
yes,
matters.
that's all that matters.
I'd buy it for $1.
So the author of this novella, John William Polidori, I don't do last names. I don't do names.
Polidori.
That one.
Polidori.
He's really the one who starts to give the shape of what we know as the vampire today. So the vampire starts to become a little bit more appealing, a little bit more charming.
Interesting.
Because
Yeah.
sex is of the devil.
Oh, that makes sense. Yep.
Well,
Yeah.
of course it is.
How can we make this sinful? How can we make it more alluring?
Do you think that was trying to do some population control, given it was Regency
This is
era?
Regency era, isn't it? I think, when you go into that time frame, sex is the devil, is the nemesis, and that is why you should be afraid of
yeah.
everything.
Sex was one of those things where you didn't talk about it, but you definitely talked about it.
This is when Caroline Lamb's sending her pubes to Lord Byron.
And at this point, you're not getting hard sex with the vampire. This is just now more charming. Maybe you're willing to have a drink with him.
Yeah, I always interpreted it as he's not quite gentlemanly. He's just a little nice. He's the guy you meet at the tavern who chats you up.
Is he the bad boy?
Not yet. I
Ooh.
would say rather than tavern, maybe Starbucks. Like someone that you're just like, okay.
But he definitely has like a twinkle in his eye that you're like, I gotta know more.
Yeah, it's the
Okay.
concept of
Yep.
being Lord.
Ooh, that's an interesting word.
The imagery of the devil in literature and in art, it starts to become less boo scary, but more, that's my scary devil voice, boo, I'm scary, but more of a, okay, we're charming. The devil starts to become a little bit more.
The devil becomes sexy by the end of the 19th century, I think.
Exactly.
Oh, 100%. Look at what's recently come out with the new Sabrina that's
Yep.
out.
Have you seen the show Lucifer? Mm.
There you go. The dude who plays the devil in that could get us.
So, a little more than 50 years after Vampire and 25 years before Dracula, we have Carmilla, which I know I wasn't very aware of prior to Jack's dissertation. And this is the story of a female vampire. And this is where, as Jack alluded to, vampires become sexy, where sex really starts to be inundated in the conversation. And what I love about this more than anything is it's an LGBTQ story,
Oh.
which
Really?
makes it more deviant when you're in the 1800s.
I don't think Joseph was being pro LGBTQ. It was more of like, she's a sinner and
Deviant.
she's gay. Like, that's not.
Even more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
But still
And that's-
great.
and-
Oh, I love it.
From a modern standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah, from a modern standpoint, I love it. But what I don't love is the fact that sexuality is all of the devil. And that's the comparison that's being drawn here.
And it makes a lot of sense because when you think about historically, biblically, everything, women are always the downfall because of sex. We are the temptress. We are the ones who bring these like so noble men down to the knees and become weak is because of our shoulders and, you know, whatever it is that is alluring from us.
The ankles, man.
Ankles,
It's all about
man.
the ankles.
So when you think about it,
Yep.
it makes absolute sense that you go from the concept of a vampire, which is this bloated, blood-dripping thing, to, well, what else is evil? Sex. So therefore, we must make the vampire female. Because you're not going to make that jump into a male vampire because men aren't inherently sexual and evil. That's the women.
I've never heard of Carmilla, and I had no idea that there was a female vampire so early into
Yeah.
the mythos or the development.
Yeah, I had no idea.
And a lot of people credit Carmilla for influencing what will later be Dracula by Bram Stoker.
So we just did an episode on Elizabeth Bathory, who was the most prolific serial killer in history,
Yep.
according to...
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I said that, ladies.
Yeah.
Yes, down. Woo! But the 650 alleged victims, you know, virginal blood and all that jazz. So I really see Carmilla in such a historic light. And I know that they've talked about how Bathory might have influenced Bram Stoker, but I'm fascinated by the fact that she really feels like a nice tie-in with Carmilla.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting that you bring up the LGBTQ reference because also another thing in our Bathory research that we found, apparently she had allegedly been exposed to lesbian orgies by her maiden aunt
Aunt
over
Clara
in Austria.
in Vienna.
And there you have that.
I like that. I think that's a cool tie-in.
Mhm.
And what an interesting conversation point that it's the women who are bringing sexual
Yes,
deviation into the conversation. It's not men. It started with the women.
And another thing historically in the 19th century, medically treating hysteria with masturbation and how that power dynamic is so skewed that these men have to solve women's hysteria by pleasuring them, but how it's not seen as a pleasure, it's seen as a medical treatment, and it's seen as the women are
Crazed.
Yeah.
crazed or crazy in hysterics.
You have Carmilla, who is seeking her own desire with a female character, Laura. She's just trying to get some. Also, a lesbian orgy sounds lovely. People need to back off. I feel like I already know that place smells really good.
It would be clean.
Lots of
It would
candles.
smell amazing and clean, and I feel safe.
There would be a lot of blankets and pillows.
Throws upon throws, yeah.
Yes.
I think what's important to that is the fact that Carmilla is unable to control her yearning, her taboo yearning, which is going to come back and play a role in what we see in Dracula and what we see in modern literature as well.
Well, and very Eve, you know, she could not resist. She could not control. She was told not to. She just couldn't.
Right.
As we all know, women are historically the ones who are unable to control their urges. Yeah, okay. Sorry, just wanted to put that out there. Look, I get it.
There.
I had an urge for Panda Express, and that happened.
I had an urge for a third glass of red wine, and it's sitting right next to me.
And that happened. Is it urges?
Ooh.
Urges or manifestations? That's
a good
the real question. Yes. So all this leads up to the famous 1897 Dracula by Bram Stoker. And we now have the male vampire, and he is the very definition of masculinity. He is strength. He has that ability to lure women. He is desirable, and he is everything that men strive to be. So we now have the sexual vampire, which with Carmilla, who was a deviant, now as admirable because it's now the male vampire. And the male vampire is seductive. He's able to steal women from the human men. And he's strong enough that, although it's not impossible to fight him off, it takes a strong male to actually defeat the vampire. And everything that was great about Carmilla, or a female vampire, really, you now have that in a male vampire. And it's like, whoa, now that's a guy.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
What a maverick.
He's doing it. He's out there doing
They
it.
have so many similar characteristics, and yet they're portrayed in the opposite perspective or opinion.
Yeah. And a lot of that is the female vampires are depicted as what society fears for women. And since the female vampires are supernatural beings as well, they also had enhanced strength. But kind of what Amy was referencing earlier, the main difference here, where we start to see male vampires and female vampires start to split off, is the ability to control. Female vampires do not have the ability to stop their urges. If they are hungry, they will go crazy. And male vampires, the very definition of control.
All I can think about, and I know we're going to get there, is Edward and Victoria.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so
it's just
blatant.
right here.
Oh, yeah.
So now that we've covered some of the history of the literature that is what we understand to be the modern day vampire, let's talk about the 3 areas where gender politics play a role and how current vampiric novels continue to perpetuate those traditional gender roles. So one is control, which we've alluded to. We're also going to talk about food and how the role of food and nourishment play a role in these gender politics.
Because food is power.
Food is power.
Food is power, which is a common theme in our podcast.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're going to talk about the overlap between vampirism and the romance genre within the fiction world.
I'm loving it. It's like a kid on Christmas or waiting for Halloween to get your Halloween candy.
Be controlled, because otherwise you're just perpetuating the stereotype.
You're just crazy.
She's
crazy excited.
Yeah, Amy, right? No.
Right.
So going into control, when we go back to Dracula, he's the one who shows control while his brides are unable to control their own sex or their desire to feed. The male vampires are defined by their ability to control themselves, while the female vampires are incapable of not acting on their instincts.
I feel it.
Yeah.
In my soul.
So when you think about control and a female vampire not being able to control, when you look at Twilight, you think Edward, who, I mean, Stephanie Meyer just set him up to be the patron saint of control. And then...
It's almost unsexy
Yeah.
how controlled he is. It's just like, okay, dude, you're a limp biscuit.
It is unsexy.
No, because if he's controlled, right, then her ability to hinder his control then places value on her.
Yeah.
And we're now teaching young women that you're only as valuable as being able to break a controlled male, yeah, and his own desire.
Which is a huge theme in just romance novels in general.
Mm-hmm.
Which is the third point, so don't...
Sorry.
I'm going to add a little bit of spin to this. I think that's also a huge theme in, they don't go by this name, but in the Mormon culture, which is a culture I'm very familiar with, which I think is reflected in this novel as well.
I can definitely see that, yeah.
And it's definitely biblical.
Oh, for sure.
Women are the stumbling block, and we are told so many times, do not be that foothold, do not give Satan a foot. And it's really interesting to see how something so archaic continues to influence popular culture, and people don't think something so archaic is still relevant. But it is. It still influences everything we do and read.
And beyond the vampire, it's just this notion of the only thing that he is attracted to is like her scent and her aura. It doesn't talk about her mind, her intelligence.
No, he really can't read her mind.
She is the epitome of boring.
He can't read her mind.
That's right.
Her mind is the last thing he's interested in, like, because he can't.
Oh my gosh, you are so right. I never thought of it like that.
No, why would he be interested in her mind?
No, like
it's a blank mystery.
She is just a physical form.
It's a canvas he can infer on.
He then fetishizes her thoughts because
blank canvas.
He can then dictate what he thinks that she's thinking rather than actually being interested in what she's thinking.
Yep.
He is a piece of work. But when you think of the female vampire, yes, we have Esme and we have Alice and then we have Rosalie. But for this conversation, and we will come back and reference them, but for this part of the conversation, we're going to talk about Victoria, who is a female vampire that doesn't have any control. She just wants to come after Bella and Edward to avenge her lover, which honestly, I get.
You see it in her hair, those curls, the
red crazy hair.
I mean, it's just a visual of the crazed female.
Unhinged.
Yep.
And also, she seems to have control when she is mated or
her control is dependent on her partner.
Oh, good. That's another great message for young girls.
Right.
Yeah.
Take note, ladies.
Because whenever she's not with James anymore, that's when she's unhinged and has no control because there's no man to reel her in.
Right.
Oh my gosh, this makes me so angry.
Side note, I slightly resent that the crazy is associated with a redhead.
Yep.
I think it's empowering to have red hair.
Yeah. Amy, do you want to tackle the Angel Drusilla?
So, very similar to Edward, we have Angel, who did come first. And Angel is this dark, broody, handsome male vampire character from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He starts season 1, and then by season 4 of Buffy, he's got his own spin-off show because he's so special. And he's special because he has a soul. And what keeps him special is the fact that he doesn't experience pleasure or true happiness. I despise this character. If you can
I
tell.
haven't picked up on
I
this.
was about to say, it's so great to meet a man with a soul. But do tell, why do you despise him?
So why I despise him is he has a soul because he is not allowed to experience true happiness. And true happiness can only be experienced because of a woman who seduces him.
Oh.
That being Buffy. He has to control himself so that he doesn't lose his soul. So he denies Buffy the emotional and romantic intimacy that she desires. With him. And he ultimately loses his soul because she seduces him.
Oh my god.
Literally in the show,
The apple.
they have sex, and when he wakes up in the morning, some curse is triggered,
His soul
and
is
his
gone.
soul is gone. She literally, pardon my French, the soul out of this boy.
It's so true. She lost her virginity to him.
Oh, I didn't realize it was her virginity.
It was her virginity that she lost to him,
Oh.
Yeah.
causing him to lose his soul. Talk about sexual trauma for her.
Yeah.
First of all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let's gloss over the fact that it's her first time and that rather than feeling any kind of special romantic or empowering moment, she's a teenage girl who is now in charge of this demon crazy thing.
And the fact that now she's
Right.
removed
And
his soul and the consequences.
And then he proceeds to torment her. And I very distinctly remember her asking, well, was I not good for you? Or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And he just completely destroys her in that
Destroys
moment.
her.
It's crazy because I'm sorry, stop saying crazy. What's wild is that it shows that a woman will never be pure enough. Female sex will never be quote unquote clean enough for a man.
A male.
Here's Buffy, a virgin, untouched and all that stuff, still able to take his soul away because of her own sex. What chance do I stand?
So there is this theory about how the perfection of love can only be found between two men.
Plato's Symposium.
And it's not necessarily in the
Mhm.
sexual relationship. It's just because they have been put on equal parts in terms of their intellectual and their capability to bond. And so the woman has no place in this top tier of love. We just physically and mentally can't get there.
What you're talking about, is that agape love?
So agape love is the love of God for man and of man for God.
I thought I use agape in my smoothies to sweeten it up.
That's
Is that
agave.
I know. I know. Agape.
Agave.
I know.
It's so close. Still sweet.
That's so punny, Caroline.
Really quick, it is the philia friend bond type of love that we're talking about.
That's brotherly
the
love.
love as close as siblings with the strength of duration, basically.
Yep.
So back to control.
There are some similarities between Drusilla and Victoria. Drusilla is a female vampire introduced in the second season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer who is seen repeatedly throughout. She's, excuse my language, batshit crazy.
She is. She's just a Looney Tune.
But that's the perfect use of crazy because it's like a female vampire. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And she's hypersexual. She has multiple partners. One of her first partners is Spike, who's my favorite on the show. He's another male vampire. But that's beside the point. Drusilla, as a human, was driven insane by Angel.
That feels
and then
fitting.
sired by Angel to be a vampire. And
Wait, what do you mean by sired?
he
by?
created her.
Turned
He's her daddy.
All I can
Mhm.
think of is Venus exploding out of Zeus's head, and I know that's not what we're discussing at this moment. But all the same, we feel it.
So Angel turns Drusilla, and they reunite when Angel loses his soul. She repeatedly comes back as this crazy character who has multiple partners, who is evil. She is more evil and unredeemable, whereas Angel eventually gets his soul back and can be redeemed.
And a spinoff.
And a spinoff.
Does Drusilla get a spinoff?
No, she does not.
Nope.
She'd probably be more interesting.
Damn it. What about Spike?
Spike gets turned into the love interest for
Which
Buffy.
I was okay with. I loved him.
You know what, though? Spike Spike walked so Damon Salvatore could run.
That's fair.
That's what
That's
I'll say
fair.
about that.
I can, yeah.
The thing about
yeah.
Spike is he didn't have a soul and was capable of love, whereas Angel was not capable of that. That's all I'm going to talk about.
Sorry, I just had a flashback to all my ex-boyfriends.
Been there.
So we're talking a little bit about mature love. One thing with Angel and Edward and even with Dracula that they all have in common is this paternal, patriarchal love.
Very much so. They are the father figure to these women that they're deflowering.
Yes.
Period
Mhm.
space.
Exactly. So with Edward, it's with Bella, and he's very much in charge of her. When we meet Bella, she's in charge of her mom. She's an only child who takes care of her flighty mom and makes the decision to move to Forks to be with her father so that she made a very mature decision at a young age. But then the second Edward comes into the picture, she's no longer capable of any decision, and he's like her father figure and has to be there for her. And then with Angel,
he enters the scene as this mysterious figure who is wise and is counseling Buffy and giving her hints and clues about what to do, and she knows nothing about him. It's not until much later, as the romantic interest begins to evolve, that she realizes he's a vampire. And so he takes on this mentorship, older man counseling figure that's sexy if you're into teacher.
I mean,
but
Catholic schoolgirl. That is a
it's not great.
legitimate
Yep.
fetish.
But see, that's schoolgirl, not Catholic school teacher.
Yes.
yeah, seriously, no one has like, oh God, you know what I wish I had was a 40-something-year-old professor that couldn't get the coffee stain out of his shirt. No, I don't
With
want
the
that.
mustard yellow tie. That's too
That's
short.
so
Yeah, no.
specific.
Yes.
I can smell him. Like, I just know.
Because the school girl is the temptress. She is the bad one.
Yeah.
And the girl is still a virgin,
Yeah,
usually.
but the professor just is like, oh, fine, if you have to.
If you have
Yeah.
to have me, I'll do it for you.
In Dracula, you have Mina.
Yeah, Mina is very virginal.
Yeah, Mina's very virginal. And what we're doing here with comparing all of them and why they're all so similar is that you have Mina, the human, the virgin. Human starts to become feminine. So the female vampire is not feminine, right? It is like the dirty, evil sex. Female humans, humanity as a whole ends up becoming the idea of the feminine, especially into the next section of food. And food for vampires is blood.
Yummy.
So Edward takes his fatherly concern for Bella and her food intake, and it goes way beyond the need to ensure her health. Edward starts to monitor Bella's diet, making sure she eats while he watches, mind you, he has to be there. And he becomes the voyeur of this. He gets satisfaction through watching her fulfillment. Consuming food becomes a masturbatory act, and while Edward gets to practice this alone, so he eats his deer away from Bella, at times he even forces Bella to fulfill this action of self-satisfaction while he watches.
I read this in your outline and my jaw dropped because this was something that I had never noticed within the Twilight saga, and I could not believe that I had let something so blatant just wash right over me. And ew!
Yeah, it's gross.
Ugh.
I was always Team Jacob.
Same.
But
I like a good
I liked Edward. It's gross, but it's also hot for a reason. You know what I mean?
It's
like,
hot for him, but this force feeding, it makes me think of goose liver and pate.
yeah.
Stuff it down their throat, make them get fat, make them get maternal, if you will.
Yeah.
oh my god, yes.
Yeah, plump them up. That's how you want us. Nice and hearty for babies.
Make those boobs bigger, get a butt, get your Kardashian look going.
So food is a parallel to sex, as we were saying, and that's not just Twilight. That's in tons of literature, and it makes sense because, again, vampires become a sexual entity, being, and since Edward and Bella are abstaining from sex, then that's why, in their case, food becomes masturbation. Abstinence is key to food being masturbation, as they say.
Is that what they say?
You heard it here first, folks.
Yeah.
There was this god-awful but amazing movie called Down with Love with Renee Zellweger and Ewan McGregor.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like about this woman who decides that she's going to empower herself by becoming male-like in the way that she handles sex. So instead of her attaching all of these feelings and emotions, she's just gonna a la carte when she wants it, what she wants. But you have to go through this little step process that she lays out in her book, Down with Love. And the first process is abstinence, so that you can figure out how to do this. And to help yourself through those urges, chocolate.
Yeah. Literally
Literally in this movie, which I am just connecting now.
I liked it. I remember it.
It's a great
But now you're making that connection. It's all
But
hindsight.
now I'm making that connection. It was all about masturbation through eating.
Yeah.
Oh.
Food is power, power is sex.
Power is sex, for sure.
Food is power,
Or
sex is power.
Mhm.
And if you can't have sex, you can't indulge in it. But you can indulge in food, so why not? Go ham.
Well,
Yeah.
and like, you break
I
up,
feel like that's what I did my entire life.
you break up with someone, go get some ice cream.
Right.
The
Kind
trope.
of Ben and
But
Jerry's.
then what are the two things that women always have to be regulated in, right? Food and sex.
Sex
Sex
and
and their
food.
size. Yeah.
God forbid women have a number above whatever number is societally appropriate. And
Mhm.
at the same time, we have to weigh a certain amount. We can only have sex with so many partners. We can only weigh so much. It always comes back to we don't get to indulge in either. And
No,
Right.
because it
Right.
goes back to our basic
mhm.
evil instincts.
Even in weight, like you said earlier, you can never be pure enough. You can never be small enough. It's
No.
always, well, 5 more pounds in that dress would really look nice.
Adam Levine's wife just proved that.
yeah.
Adam Levine cheated on
With
his
an
wife.
Instagram influencer.
Yeah, but he's claiming that he just sent flirty messages and it wasn't sex. Allegedly,
then
allegedly,
of course,
allegedly.
emotional cheating, not the same.
Because he
Mhm.
controlled his bodily urges.
Because he's in
Mhm.
control.
Oh.
So similar to Adam Levine and similar to Edward, we have Angel. And Angel abstains from sex and he abstains from drinking human blood because he has a soul.
So just like
Mhm.
Edward.
Just like
yeah.
Edward, he consumes animal blood instead. Specifically for Angel, he gets blood from the butcher. So he gets leftover old blood. It's less good, less nutritious,
Super gross.
Yeah.
More clotted.
congealed. I don't know. The act of abstaining from drinking human blood, like Jack has alluded to, is equivalent to Angel abstaining from carnal pleasure, as we see with his relationship with Buffy in the first season. In doing so, it makes Angel holier than thou. He is set apart. He is special. That's why he has a soul.
And then you can see that in Twilight as well.
Mm-hmm.
With the whole family, the Cullens, because they all have decided to set themselves apart as better than these urges
Yeah.
by not partaking of human blood.
To take the whole sex thing one step further, masturbation or drinking animal blood is acceptable because you can do it in secret. Whereas drinking human blood or
There's
being
always
sexually,
a witness.
there's a witness, it's the ultimate sin.
Mhm.
So it's very similar in that way to Edward and Bella and their abstaining as well. And as we discussed before, once Angel actually has sex with Buffy, loses his soul, he then re-engages. His appetite has been whet and he can't control it anymore. And it's the human female, or the epitome of the feminine,
Yeah, it was her fault.
who is at fault for that.
Yeah,
And
totally.
then in becoming evil, he's also becoming that feminine, that weakness, right?
It's this interesting balance.
But she's the one that takes the blame. He isn't weaker.
Yeah.
He lost control because of her.
Right. He's less holy, and now he's elevated to this ultimate masculinity. He doesn't lose.
Yeah, he gets the girl and he gets to become stronger. And he gets to become the bad boy, the more masculine, like, I'm not afraid, kill.
And he gets to ruin her first
Yeah.
And a spinoff!
and a spinoff.
This poor girl's first time, she's not busting out tricks. She doesn't know what she's doing. And that's what's gonna taint your soul?
Your
no.
first time
No.
is not sexy.
Mm-mm.
And that's what's going to bring down someone's humanity, is that?
It's kind of sad, honestly.
It's really sad.
Hold out for something better, Mr. Control.
If
Seriously.
you're gonna have a chocolate cake, have a chocolate cake.
Have a chocolate
With
cake.
fudge.
Have the whole thing.
Not to insult Sarah Michelle Gellar's cupcakes.
No. I'm sure she developed
the woman
fine
has a
cupcakes
cookbook
over
now,
years
so.
and she figured out how to ice her own cupcake.
She's got Freddie Prinze Jr. for 20 plus years. Good for her.
Good
Those
for
are some
her.
damn fine cupcakes.
It's amazing how much humanity and everything that is humans becomes feminine. So human blood, that is now the temptation. That is the feminine. Even if they're drinking from a man, it is still human blood.
From the very beginning, you look at Adam, and he is of God, and then Eve is of man. So women
the whole
become
ribcage.
the whole
Yes.
ribcage thing.
Mhm.
Women from the very beginning are a step lower and therefore more base and more at fault and more human in some aspects. We have less ability to be near the godly.
Biblical lore, right? Like with Lilith.
Oh, I wondered when we get to Lilith. Sorry.
I love a good Lilith lore. And
Same.
Well, because it's mostly based in Judaism, not Christianity.
shocker, because Christians weren't there before to have that lore.
Yeah.
And yet it's there.
And yet it's there. All of a sudden, Christians were just like, hey, you know what I don't like? Women being remotely equal. Let's just boot this out.
But you know what we could do is bring back Lilith.
Mind blown.
Mind blown. Serpent woman.
Ooh, serpent woman? Really?
In art, Lilith is often portrayed as the serpent or as half serpent, half woman. And she's often conflated as the snake that tempted Eve.
And she's the mother of all succubus, right?
Yep, she's the mother of all
And
succubus.
demons. I could see where she would be the whore of Babylon. I could see that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like, wasn't like the big falling out is like she wanted to be on top or something during sex? Did I make that up?
Absolutely it.
It is, right?
To be on top.
Because she wanted to finally get a big O.
And Adam was like, no, you cannot. This is the way it has been ordained. You will be on the bottom.
Sir, you get to put less effort.
It's better for you.
Everyone wins here.
Sit down, shut up, and wait.
Had Adam known he would get to try less, I think he wouldn't have fought it.
See, we did talk about my husband on this podcast.
Just slow clap. Oh my God. I think you got to get an ice bucket for him. That burn was just...
This is on fire.
Just loved that so
Mic drop.
I already respected you, but now it just
thank you. I'm so glad I didn't.
It just like my respect was here, and now it's just exploded, and it doesn't have physical form.
Ooh.
I love it.
So funny. So then you get to vampirism and romance, and there's a lot of similarities between Edward, Bella, and Victoria, and Angel, Drusilla, and Buffy, and then Dracula, Mina, and Carmilla. No, I'm just, yes, you know where I'm going with this, but there's a lot of names, a lot of characters, but ultimately when you go back to Buffy and to Twilight, at their core, they're romance books, because even though Dracula starts off as this more scary, intense book, it's a horror book, it's funny how it then very quickly evolves to be part of the romance genre.
Yes.
Romance being the sexy romances, not Keats and Wordsworth.
Like if Bram Stoker could read Twilight, what do you think his mind would...
I think he'd be like, this
Turning
could
over
use
in
more
his
sex.
grave.
What's going on with this? What's wrong with you?
Actually, that's valid. He would be like, give in.
What
Let's
the
go.
hell? Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you kind of have to start saying, like, there's a reason why it goes into this other genre of romance, because vampirism is an integral part of romance. They are one and the same. You have the male leads, the romantic hero, and the vampire represent the dangers and the sexuality that lures the heroine / human female to their sexual submission. And then you have the innocent and or virginal heroine, which Amy and I were like, why do we call it heroine? It's just annoying.
Yeah.
Why can't we just call her a hero?
Here we are.
Because she's a drug.
Which came first, the drug or the heroin?
Hey!
Not to directly quote, but she's my own personal brand of heroin.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's true. And they always end up having to be virginal. And I'm going to reference a little bit here 50 Shades of Grey, because...
A classic reference.
You can't talk about Twilight and not talk about 50 Shades.
And if anyone doesn't know why, who's listening, 50 Shades of Grey was a Twilight fan fiction. It was not me. It was not my Twilight fan fiction.
I was about to say, it could have
It is
been you.
I.
You could be a millionaire.
Fun fact, I interned in Random House Publishing, and I was with the marketers, and I interned directly underneath the woman who did the original marketing for 50 Shades of Grey.
Fascinating.
That must have been so much fun.
It was oddly kismic, and it was just one of those things where I'm like, I just finished my dissertation on this, and I did an entire chapter about 50 Shades of Grey, and I respect you and hate you at the same time.
Look what you've done. But like, yeah.
But when you look at that character, it's fascinating how Anastasia, she is a virgin, and she is an adult virgin, and she is someone who is also highly sexual, and she's inexperienced, but at the same time she redeems Christian in his lecherous BDSM ways.
Yeah.
Even though whether his is actually BDSM or just abuse, that's a topic for a different time.
It is.
Spoiler, it's just abuse, not actual BDSM. And then in romance, you also have the other woman. You have Carmilla, and then
in Buffy, there's a couple examples. Drusilla's the example that we talked about, who he sired, which the making of a vampire is akin to a sexual experience. We have Darla, who is the vampire that made Angel, and she seduced him sexually before she made him. She is another other woman who, ironically, fits the bill when we talk about Bella and redeeming of the female vampire.
I think it's super interesting that you bring up the other woman, because even in Vampire Diaries, it's dichotomy of the doppelgangers, Catherine and Elena. Mm-hmm. Catherine is very much this badass sexual being. She just radiates this power and sexuality.
She wanted both brothers, and we're supposed to shame her for that? Like, no, that's understandable. Hypersexual.
But that's the deal. The other woman is always too much hypersexual, to the extreme and to the dichotomy of the virgin.
And you have Elena, who also wants both brothers, but she has to make that choice. And even in going and becoming a vampire, she does try to retain so much of her humanity. And that's ultimately why she and Stefan break up, because she's not who she was prior to becoming a vampire. She's not the same person, according to him.
I'm super intrigued by this idea that you sire something, either sexually, you take them before or after. This notion of both the father and the sexual predator. That's really what it is. I find that connection very interesting, and frankly, you can see it with the Cullens, because they were all sired by Carlisle. First he makes himself a wife, and then he makes himself little kids. Yeah. It's a very twisted relationship. Yeah.
Makes total sense. You have Edward, who sired there, and then you have Christian from 50 Shades of Grey, who was in an abusive
sexual relationship at a young age.
Yeah, with an older woman. And then you have Angel, who's been siring, but also guides Buffy as, the sexual guide, in the same way where Edward is somehow the sexual guide for Bella, even though he's also a virgin. And then you have Christian with Anastasia, where he's guiding her not just with sex, but to that fake BDSM lifestyle. And at one point, I would like to just call out, there's a part in the book where they engage in something that's quite rough, ends up with her being spanked, and she doesn't like it. It hurts, and it hurts her emotionally, and she gets really choked up about it. And his rationale to her is, but you came. Oh. Yeah. And it was like, but didn't you enjoy it? Didn't your body react to it? Didn't you have feelings? And it's like, that's...
I mean, my body reacts to a lot of things.
Yeah, like, that's, like, no. Like, that's not at... We're not going there. But what is Dracula and the vampire, if not...
the father and the sexual predator.
Yeah. He leads his brides. He brings them. He sires them. It is a very patriarchal thing, but there's no Dracula without the other woman. And ultimately, when it comes to romance, when it comes to the male lead, he's normally very emotionally draining, emotionally abusive. In romance, you typically have the other woman, but you also have the other male, and he's the male that should be the person that she picks. He's safer. Exactly. The Jacob.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I have a quote.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Would it be so wrong to make Jacob happy? Even if the love I felt for him was no more than a weak echo of what I was capable of. Even if my heart was far away, wondering and grieving after my fickle Romeo, would it be so very wrong?
So you always have in romance the male character that is the right choice. He's right on paper. And yet,
on paper,
we, the female heroine, is lured by this emotional male vampire.
The bad boy. Like, we want to, like, kind of fix him almost and make him more human.
Because you are now fixing him with your humanity, which brings us to the last point, that ultimately motherhood saves female vampires or humans.
Which, like, can my eyes go any farther back into my skull?
Yeah, so we see that with Bella. Bella goes from human to vampire, and in doing so also becomes pregnant.
Which is not supposed to happen.
Yeah.
It is okay that she's become this vampire because she is also entering motherhood.
In fact, it's actually pregnant first, and then vampire is a last resort.
Yeah.
Just because it is so taboo, and it can only be because that will fulfill the motherhood.
Yep.
Yeah. She can't become a mother without becoming a vampire.
And with Esme and Rosalie and
especially
Alice, like,
Rosalie.
There's that maternal desire. So they're fixed because they wanted to be moms.
it's painful because a lot of women feel that way. Being a mother is a very difficult subject because for every mom, there are plenty of women that couldn't be and wanted to be for reasons just out of their control. So that is a very human feeling to give to the vampire.
Right.
And when Philip trying to decide between Jacob and Edward, there is a full conversation in the book and in the movie where he says, why wouldn't you want me? I'm warm, I'm breathing, I'm alive, I can give you children. He can't give you children.
I could save you because I can give you motherhood.
I can help you reach your highest potential.
And this idea that as a woman going through pregnancy, whatever suffering you have to go through, the baby will be worth it. It'll be worth it. And
yes.
Right.
I've seen the CGI. Renesmee was not worth it. That gremlin? No.
Renesmee was not worth it.
Well, it wasn't until the second half of the 20th century that it wasn't decided that maybe we should save mom first, baby second.
Yeah.
That is a very new concept.
But you don't see that depicted in media.
No.
It's still not going to be shown that way in media. And
which brings me back to Darla, who is Angel's sire, who has always been depicted as the bad guy, ends up becoming pregnant because she's resurrected. Angel impregnates her, and in order for the baby to survive, she has to stake herself. She has to sacrifice herself, kill herself to have that baby for the baby to survive. Yeah, she's redeemed from being this evil character for years because she was willing to stake herself so that the baby could live.
Yeah, all your past sins forgiven because you're willing to die for the sake of
a fetus.
For a fetus and what we've decided that women's soul role is.
Not we.
No, not we. No, not here. We're
society.
We are far more open-minded.
I'm using the British, the Queen's we.
The regnal we.
Yeah.
That's true. It's probably the King's we now.
Ugh.
I know. Oh. Yeah, we don't want to talk about his we.
We do not. We do not. Oh my god.
No, I saw a picture of his hands and I don't need to know anything else.
Oh my god.
Oh no. No. There's so much more to it, and thank you for letting us go on this vampire web.
This was an amazing look at something because we do not read vampirical novels to take apart.
You don't do a literary analysis like these ladies do so well.
I do not do a literary analysis when I read Twilight. I will now.
This is fascinating, and I can't wait to see how it changes how I read things.
I agree. I think it's disconcerting, but also very empowering to be like, oh, that's why I feel this way.
Yeah, and I think there's a healthy balance. I love Twilight, and I'm also currently reading more of this 21-book series called The Black Dagger Brotherhood, and it's vampires and it's smut, and I love it, and it's problematic.
Sounds a lot of fun to me.
Yin and yang, it's cool to be both.
I love going into it and examining all of these things and being like, that's extremely up. All right, where's my Kindle? I'm gonna, let
me just go put that on my list.
Yeah.
It's okay to delve into smut.
It's okay to enjoy the things that are problematic. The whole point is to talk about it. And again, this didn't start with Twilight. It started with a bloated vampire.
Or it started with a Hungarian countess who had a ton of land that the king of Hungary wanted, and some girls died. So therefore, obviously she's a serial
probably
killer.
from the play.
And, society just can't handle a sexy woman or a woman who wants sex.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It's fun. I still love Twilight. I still watch it and read it, but it's always a trip when you look at it through different lenses.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it more complex. It makes it more exciting, and it definitely makes me wonder if Stephenie Meyers knew what she was doing.
I don't know. Amy has thoughts on this one.
Stephenie Meyer has a religious background that is similar to my own, or is the exact same. I actually went to church with her cousin.
Tell me more.
Yeah,
so
yes.
You're practically family.
Practically. But the point of that is that some of the gender roles and stereotypes and expectations are very ingrained within Western society because the religious aspect, the Judeo-Christian society that we're familiar with influences literature. You can't separate the two.
Western literature.
The literature that we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. You can't separate the two. They have to be part of the conversation.
I totally agree.
And I think individuals like Stephenie Meyer, like the men who wrote Dracula and Carmilla, were heavily influenced by the religious culture that they were brought up in or that surrounded them. And for that reason, there's going to be themes that overlap that we've seen.
But I would argue it's subconscious to a large
100%.
extent.
I absolutely agree. I think it's subconscious because it's so ingrained within us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as much as we want to say it's because of Stephenie Meyer's specific branch of Christianity, and she made abstinence sexy.
No.
It
just is.
Didn't we just discuss that it took Buffy and Angel a whole ass year before they slept together? Think about every single movie and TV show where these people don't get together until the end. She didn't invent that. Abstinence is sexy because you're withholding, because you're showing control, and you're waiting until the man breaks.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that allows for the other woman to be that foil.
Oh,
that
yeah.
Evil.
Think about how many things I guess I was told, like, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free?
Yeah, I've heard that one.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Classic.
Talk about a standard of depriving a fundamental human urge.
And it's women specifically that are supposed to deprive that. Historically speaking, when women would get married, they needed to be the virgin because that way the male could ensure that no leftover sperm from some previous boyfriend could be in there and sire children.
Right.
But more importantly, the men were supposed to be experienced.
Yeah.
Because someone has to know what they're doing, which I can't argue isn't a good thing. But
oh, no, I get it. Yeah.
Men would get taken to the brothel
for educational purposes.
14, 13 by their fathers.
Oh my God, Bridgerton. The Duke goes to Daphne and she's like, oh, I didn't even know what men and women do beneath the sheets.
I mean, she knew nothing.
And he's experienced, it's hot. And I can't,
It is hot. It is hot. You can't deny that that's hot. That's why it's a trope.
It is hot.
And that's why men wanted the virgin, and why the virgin kind of liked the whole...
Yeah, but then what saves Daphne's character is that she's determined to get pregnant.
Done. Just have to get pregnant. But then you get the third part, which are the women that were used and then thrown away.
You don't even have to look at the other woman as used and thrown away. She's knowledgeable.
Oh, I like that better.
She has power because she has knowledge.
Think about Diane de Poitiers and that relationship with Catherine Medici and Henry Valois.
And so women with knowledge and therefore women with power are despised because in some ways they are more powerful than men.
Because they teach the men.
Yes. And they can bend men to their will with their hoo-has.
Yeah.
Right.
My hoo-ha has magical power.
But can it suck someone's soul out? That's the question.
Let's ask my husband. Where did he go?
This has been amazing. And listeners, please go check out Booktalk for Booktok. Wherever you get your podcasts, they also have a Ko-Fi page if you're willing to buy them a coffee. I think that would be great. Their merch is up on Etsy, which we think we're going to follow suit. So check us out and check them out. We are so lucky to have them because guess what? At this very point in time, they are #1 in the Spotify Arts podcast, and we are so happy to have them on.
I think this is a great collaboration because we think, oh, I really like history or I really like literature. But they go together. They are yin and yang. We just talked about how the biblical world of Judeo-Christianity has influenced Western literature. Well, that is a book, and that is a history. It's both. These things are so intertwined. You can learn about a society by reading their literature, and at the same time, you can expand your view of literature by learning about history. So this is a lovely pairing.
Exactly.
I have thoroughly enjoyed talking to you both here. It's been so much fun.
Thank you so much.
We're so happy to have had you. We are going to be on Booktalk for Booktok in their post-season, and we will be talking about the mythos and lore that is in the Mossverse. So Sarah J. Maas is the author of A Court of Thorns and Roses and the subsequent series, and we're going to be talking about how she borrows things from Greek mythology, how she is even bringing stuff from Ukrainian folklore. It's really interesting, and we're excited to be guests. And that, my friends, is that. I'm Erica.
And I'm Caroline.
And we are Pithily Yours.
This episode is brought to you by the Pithy Chronicle, LLC. The Pithy Chronicle is intended for education, entertainment, and non-commercial purposes. Any views or opinions expressed in this podcast are personal and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the owner may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity. While we offer lots of sarcasm, this podcast does not offer any advice or services. Listening to this podcast may induce fits of laughter, unexpected distraction, or uncontrollable rage at the subjects, hopefully not at us. We hope you learned something today. If not, so sorry. Please be advised we are not experts in the following fields: medical, legal, financial, technological, thermonuclear engineering, submarine warfare, neuroscience, or cat husbandry. Thanks for listening to our little disclaimer. Just covering our history-loving asses. Bye!